In a quiet, ancient forest in southwest London, British YouTuber Will, known for his camping channel Will's Whereabouts, set out for what he thought would be an ordinary night alone in Box Hill. As the sun set and shadows stretched across the forest floor, Will settled into his campsite, his tent surrounded by the dense, dark woods. The only sounds were the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. But as he lay in his sleeping bag, ready to drift off, he heard something. A faint, low moan floating through the night air. The moan was so soft at first, almost like a whisper carried on the wind, but it grew louder, turning into a disturbing, inhuman wail. The kind of sound that chills you to the bone, something you'd expect to hear in a nightmare, not in the real world. He froze, straining to hear it, thinking perhaps it was just a stray animal or a gust of wind. But the moan grew louder, morphing into a haunting wail, echoing through the trees, each rise and fall piercing the silence around him. Will's camera caught his uneasy whispers as he muttered, "I don't think I'm getting much sleep tonight." The eerie howling seemed to circle his campsite, fading in and out, leaving Will to wonder if he truly was alone. His viewers speculated. It was a fox, a lost hiker, or something else that had prowled those woods long before. Will tried to steady his breathing, but with every exhale, he felt more vulnerable, like he was being watched. He scanned the surrounding darkness, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever creature or presence was responsible, but saw only blackness. The howling eventually stopped, but in the silence that followed, the forest felt heavier, like it held secrets best left alone. As the night wore on, Will's breath became shallow, his eyes constantly scanning the blackness around him. The eerie sounds eventually ceased, but by then, the forest had cast its shadow of fear over Will and anyone watching. The next morning, with little sleep and nerves frayed, Will packed up, leaving the forest behind, but not the feeling that something had been watching him all along. In January 2015, a group of film students in Auckland, New Zealand, decided to shoot some footage near Parnell Railway Station. The camera panned across the grassy area and shadowy pathways, laughter filling the air as they captured moments for a casual project. But then, their laughter stopped. Just beyond the tall grass, two figures emerged, a man and a woman wearing expressionless white masks that hid their faces completely. For a moment, the students thought it was a prank, perhaps some classmates trying to get a laugh. But as the masked strangers stepped closer, something changed. The blank masks seemed to warp in the dim light, appearing more menacing with each step. The students' nerves quickly turned to fear as they realized the figures weren't laughing or moving in a way that felt human. They seemed to glide rather than walk, and their heads tilted in an eerie robotic fashion. Their movements were slow and deliberate, and something in their body language sent chills through the students. Then they noticed it. One of the masked figures held what looked like a pistol. Panic set in, and the group's nervous laughter faded as they started to back away. But the figures continued advancing, silent and unnervingly calm. With adrenaline surging, the students turned and ran, fleeing backward toward the main road. As they glanced over their shoulders, they could see the masked strangers watching them from a distance, the masks still fixed in a blank, chilling stare. Police were called, and a helicopter was dispatched to the scene, its searchlight sweeping through the tall grass. Authorities later confirmed that the masked pair carried fake weapons, but their true identities and motives were never revealed. Chris and his friends couldn't shake the feeling that they'd encountered something beyond just a prank. The masked couple hadn't just tried to scare them, they'd watched them, pursued them, as though playing a game only they knew the rules to. Was it a prank, an attempt to frighten, or was there something darker beneath those blank, staring faces? Whatever the reason, the students were left with a haunting memory of the masked strangers and the unsettling feeling that some mysteries are better left unsolved. YouTuber Kaz and his friends ventured into the dense Belgian forest. Their goal was to explore an abandoned campsite rumored to be haunted. But even before they reached the campsite, signs began to appear that this adventure was no ordinary outing. Near the forest's entrance, they found a tree marked with a sign. "This is a space of prayer. Please respect the space." Undeterred, they continued deeper into the woods until they found another sign. "Beware, watchdog." Just as they laughed off the warning, a noise pierced the quiet.
What the fuck? Dat is niet mijn auto of zo, hè?
A faint, eerie clanging sound that seemed to echo between the trees. The forest suddenly felt colder, darker, like the shadows had thickened around them. Then came a whisper, a voice so soft it was barely audible. It stopped their laughter immediately. They turned, hoping to see who was behind the voice, but found nothing but empty darkness. And then they saw her, a woman in a white robe, holding an axe, her expression blank as she advanced toward them with slow, deliberate steps. Panic set in, and Kaz and his friends scattered, each one running in different directions, heart pounding as they sprinted through the underbrush. The woman didn't stop. She continued following them, her face pale and emotionless in the moonlight. When police arrived, Kaz stumbled out from the shadows, shaken but relieved to be safe. But as the officers spoke to him, the woman emerged from the trees, still holding the axe, her gaze distant. 6 officers restrained her, but her eerie calm lingered in the air. Kaz and his friends left that night with more than just footage. They left with memories they would never shake. Memories of the woman with the axe who had turned their harmless exploration into a nightmare. Project Amber, a solo van camper, thought he'd found the perfect camping spot in the French mountains, but soon after parking, his van's fridge stopped working. Frustrated, he decided to fix it, and as he worked, he heard a distant low moan, a sound that seemed to come from deep within the forest. Ignoring it at first, he focused on his repair, but the sound grew louder as if calling to him. Eventually, curiosity got the better of him, and he ventured toward an old well he'd seen earlier. As he reached it, the sound stopped. He scanned the area but saw nothing. Then, out of the shadows, she appeared, a young girl dressed in plain monk-like robes, her feet bare, her head shaved. She moved with an eerie slowness, her eyes blank as they passed over him. She didn't seem to be lost or in distress. Instead, it felt like she was exactly where she wanted to be, as though she belonged to the mountains in a way he never could. She walked through the trees, glancing at him briefly before disappearing into the forest. He called out, asking if she was okay, but she gave no response. Deciding he'd had enough, he headed back to his van, but as he approached, he saw her again, crossing the trail, her silent gaze fixed ahead. Amber quickly packed up, started the van, and left, but as he drove, he saw her twice more, once by the roadside, and again, standing in the distance, watching as he sped away. To this day, he can't explain who she was or how she vanished so quickly, but he left the mountains with one certainty. Something strange lurked within those woods. Even as he sped down the mountain, the forest seemed to echo with her silence, a reminder that some places hold secrets no one should disturb. In Pluckley, Kent, lies a place known as the Screaming Woods, a forest infamous for its eerie occurrences and whispered legends. The Bell Explorers, a team of urban adventurers, decided to test their nerves by venturing into these woods after dark, hoping to catch a glimpse of the supernatural. They found a spot deep within the woods and began calling out, asking for signs of any spirits lingering there. Silence stretched around them, broken only by their quiet breaths and the occasional rustling of leaves. They stood still, listening, waiting. The silence was thick, almost oppressive, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. Then, just as they were about to dismiss it as another myth, a rustling sound came from the bushes nearby. Minutes passed and nothing happened. One of them whispered, "Did you hear that?" The others nodded, their faces pale in the glow of the flashlight. The sound grew louder, the rustling moving closer as if something, or someone, was inching toward them. They decided to leave, walking briskly back to the car, glancing nervously over their shoulders. But just as they reached the edge of the woods, a final noise, A guttural growl echoed from behind them, sending them sprinting the last few yards. For the Bell explorers, the Screaming Woods became a place they would never return to. Whatever was lurking in those shadows that night wasn't done with them. It had simply let them go, for now. And for anyone else thinking of testing their courage, the lesson was clear. Be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. With these eerie camping experiences, each story leaves us wondering what truly hides within the world's forests and mountains. Whether it's a strange encounter with a silent figure, the unsettling presence of masked strangers, or a ghostly voice in the woods, these campers returned with more than just memories. They return with mysteries that may never be solved. Each haunting experience serves as a reminder. When you're alone in the wild, you're never really alone.